Hello, welcome to Eternal Education. If you don't know me already, my name is Keegan Maloney, and the reason that I make these podcasts is twofold. One, to teach you, and two, to teach myself. And I'm doing something a little bit different today by just recording a solo podcast just about things that I'm chewing on, books I'm reading. I'm going to cover psychedelics, two books that I think have been the most impactful for me, and then also the law of attraction and manifestation, my thoughts on that. So, one thing that I'm learning is communication for me is the biggest superpower I've found in life. The better I become at communicating, the more clear that I think, the more awareness I have of myself, the better I'm able to develop relationships with others, which in turn leads to a more fulfilling life. And so I am doing this also to hold myself accountable, to eliminate the likes and ums, to become more clear with my thoughts. And there's a cycle that I've found with learning for me that it's one to consume and then two to output. So you learn and then teach, and that completes the actual learning cycle. So that's a big reason why I'm doing these as well, is to flesh out my own thoughts. And if you find something interesting, if you take something away from it, great. If not, no big deal at all. There's probably other people on the internet you can find to resonate with. But I fucking love the internet. I've learned so much. And I think when you really tap into the power of using it in a healthy way, it can dramatically change your life. And by healthy, I mean there's a difference between doom scrolling or doom consuming and actually consuming to learn. And what I mean by doom scrolling or doom consuming is just scrolling on Instagram endlessly or TikTok or Twitter or watching YouTube videos endlessly with really no end in mind. And yeah, I do that from time to time too, but what I notice is when I get caught in that trap, I leave that session, I guess you could call it, feeling foggy, not having as much clarity, and feeling a little bit more anxious. There's a direct correlation between screen time and anxiety. So I know I'm not unsusceptible to the superpowers that these platforms are of creating a pattern of attention deficit disorder. And that focus muscle really atrophies when you are just doom scrolling and doom consuming. But I want to make content that doesn't do that to you, hopefully. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is psychedelics and just what I think about them, my experiences with them. Now, I do want to preface this by saying psychedelics are not for everyone. Psychedelics are dynamite. You can use psychedelics to blow through a wall in a cave that might be in your way, but you can also use them to blow yourself up. So there's a very fine line, and I've found that using them in certain ways is harmful and using them in other ways can be beneficial. So I am not recommending psychedelics to everyone. They are illegal, and this is just my own experience that I'm sharing for educational purposes. So one thing that's really important with psychedelics is your set and setting. Now, these terms get thrown a lot if you've done a little bit of research into using psychedelics. But to me, what set means is your mindset. What are you going into the psychedelic ceremony with in your mind? What is your intention? Why are you wanting to do this? Are you doing it because you heard it would be cool and fun and trippy and you want to hang out with some friends and just see cool colors? Maybe, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I've found if I'm going into a psychedelic ceremony with a mindset of trying to escape or trying to forget all my problems or to just get high to feel better than I am currently right now, it doesn't end up being an impactful or powerful experience that it can be. And so for me, the mindset that I try to take into ceremonies as best as I can is a mindset of I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to see my blind spots, and I want to face things that maybe I'm scared of facing. Because what it seems to do is pull up the veil of your mind. The analogy I like to give is if you imagine a river flowing and there's a dam. The dam is there to help slow down the water that's coming in on the other side. So on one side of the dam, the water's higher, and there's less that comes out on the other side. So it almost is like a it is a stop to stop the full flow of water coming through at full speed. And that dam is our ego. Our ego filters out our subconscious and unconscious mind into a nice little neat river that we can use to interface reality with every day, which is awesome because if we didn't have egos, we'd all just be staring at the wall in awe, feeling the gravity of eternity, not even knowing what we are, who we are, what our name is, not even being able to talk. So our egos are a good thing. But every now and again, it's been beneficial for me to pick up that dam, to remove that ego, and allow the full river and spectrum of consciousness to flow through me. And what happens when you do that is the water starts rushing through, and that can be scary for some people. And it's been scary for me many times. And you hear a lot in the psychedelic space to just surrender and allow yourself to flow down the river. It's the difference between trying to walk upriver in a really steep current and just sitting back on a tube and letting it take you. The more that you resist, the more you resist the nooks and crannies the river's trying to take you down, the harder the experience becomes. So set mindset. What are you going into the experience with? What do you want to learn from it? What do you want to take away? Now, for me, this looks like before I do the ceremony, literally writing down a full page, journaling. What do I want to get out of this? Why am I doing this? I also write to the medicine because I believe it is a consciousness technology that is conscious and very intelligent. And I just want to let the medicine, and when I say medicine, I'm referring to psychedelics because the way that I've used them, they have been medicinal. I'm writing to the medicine, assuring it that I respect it and that I honor it and that I'm grateful for it and that these are the things I want to get out of the experience. And I ask it to keep me safe and to guide me to these lessons in the most graceful, peaceful, and gentle way possible. And that is essentially my setup for the ceremony. Now, I think about my intention quite a bit before I do it. It's not just like, oh, today I'm going to do mushrooms. Let me write this down. I plan it out in weeks, if not months in advance, and I really allow the question to marinate. What do I want to get out of this? And that will be different for every person. So I'm just going to leave that at that for you if you do decide that it is something that you want to try. Mindset, super important, but equally as important is the setting. What is the environment you are doing the substance in? What I have found is the best environment to do psychedelics in is with someone who knows how to navigate the psychedelic waters, meaning some sort of guide or facilitator, not just your friend Joe who's going to trip sit you and then mess around with you while you're on the psychedelics because he thinks it's funny and play jokes on you. That's not what you want. Those experiences are not going to be enjoyable. They're not going to be as fruitful as it could be if you had someone who's holding a safe space for you, and just make sure that you're keeping yourself safe. So I like to do it in an environment that I feel safe, with a person I feel safe, to make sure that they'll keep me safe and they know how to navigate things if challenging things come up for me, and can just really be that safety net. I think is super important. And then also with that environment comes in music. I think music is a powerful way to guide these experiences. I enjoy music that doesn't have any words and that's emotional, that allows me to really squeeze out, massage, and navigate these emotions that are trapped all around in my fascia. And that's been the most fruitful thing that I've done. I can send you some playlists that I've used to do these ceremonies if that is something you're interested in. Now, the way that psychedelics have taught me is through direct experience. I think there's a big difference between reading something in a book and experiencing something directly in your body. It's a very somatic experience, and that's why it can be challenging for people, is if you do have certain traumas that are still trapped in your nervous system, when that dam comes up, when the psychedelics kick in, you're going to be able to really feel into those and see them for what they are. So challenging things might come up. Maybe something terrible happened to you as a kid, or maybe you're neglecting yourself in this way that you're not even aware of. These things are going to come to your forefront of your awareness, and you're going to have to look at them directly, which is why it's so important to have a guide to be able to help you navigate these things if they are challenging. Now, that doesn't mean it's a bad trip. I hear that word thrown around a lot. I necessarily don't believe in the term bad trip. I think there's challenging experiences and a little less challenging experiences. Now, if you are in you have a mindset where you're just wanting to get high, wanting to escape reality, want to get away from all your problems, and maybe you're at a house party with a couple buddies, having some beers, and you take the psychedelics in that type of settings, you're just listening to some grimy hip hop music. Now, that's not a knock on hip hop. I do love hip hop, but it's definitely not the music that I want to be impressing on my body when I'm opened up to the gravity of reality. But if you're in that setting, you might have a really challenging experience, but it's going to teach you a lot. It might teach you why you felt the need to escape reality, why you felt the need to do this in this environment, and also how that environment is affecting you even when you're not in the psychedelic ceremony, how it's impressing on your subconscious, how these people are influencing in your life. You're going to be able to read through the lines. So it is always best to do it in an environment where you are safe to navigate those things and there's not going to be people messing with you. So you can work through these somatic experiences in the most safe, complete, and healing way possible. Now, that brings me to frequency. How often do I think people should do psychedelics? Again, I don't have an opinion on how anyone should use psychedelics. I just want to give my opinions, my experiences. I probably have a psychedelic ceremony maybe once a year. It's been a little bit less than that recently. And by substances that I'm using, I've used mainly mushrooms, LSD, and DMT. I have been using mushrooms the most because they have been most in resonance with my body and have worked best for me. But it's really about once a year because I've found that's really all that I need to kind of do a check-in with my mind, a check-in with my subconscious, a check-in with my life and take inventory on the different areas and aspects of my life to see where I'm at and maybe get new perspective. And that doesn't mean I need to do it every year. That doesn't mean like, oh, I haven't done it this year, I need to go do it. It's really on a need to know basis. And that comes with really tuning in with your instinct and intuition and knowing when you're doing it from a centered and aligned place. So it doesn't need to be often. These aren't things you that I do every year, or every couple months. I would say I've been about once a year for the past few years. And again, I just want to wrap this all up and put a bow on it with saying they're not for everybody. You don't need psychedelics to learn about yourself. You don't need psychedelics to introspect. You don't need psychedelics to reach new levels of reality. You can do all these things without psychedelics. They're simply a tool that can be used in a helpful or harmful way, but by no means are they necessary, and by no means do people who take psychedelics are they more advanced, more evolved, more intelligent, or on a better trajectory than you. With that being said, I do think if used correctly and you do feel the call to them and you're going to do it in a completely safe space, I do think they can be impactful, but don't put all your weight in them as being this silver bullet, magical pill that's going to fix all your problems because that is not what they are. So, with that being said about psychedelics, I'm going to go into books. Now, books have been another thing that have taught me so much about myself and about life. And I'm going to talk about one, how I read books, because I think how you read books is very important in terms of what you get out of it and how much you learn from it. So the way that I read books is kind of opposite from how we're taught to read books in school, which is you got to read it cover to cover. You got to finish and just grind through it, even if you don't enjoy the book. I like to read multiple books at once. So right now I'm reading 3 or 4 books right now, and I'm just reading pages here and there when I feel like I need to. It's every day. I do read every day, but I never feel like I need to finish a book. If I get a chapter to it, I'm like, oh, this is boring. This is just not filling me up with energy. I'm going to close the book and be done with it. But if I do find a book that's really juicy and I'm squeezing a lot out of, one thing I like to do is I like to grab a pen with the book and I just mark up the book everywhere. By marking up, I mean underlining a very interesting point and then writing in the margins what my thoughts are. It's almost like I'm interacting with the author. So say I'll underline a point and I'll just put a question mark because maybe I don't know what that means. Or I'll make a little doodle of something that those words make me think of, or I'll just write some thoughts when I get done with the page, like, that's interesting. Or I'll ask a question to further the point. Well, what about this in correlation to that? And you're having this interaction with the text that makes it so much more impactful for me than just reading it passively. So if you're watching this on video, uh, I'll show you an example. So here's just an example of one of my favorite books, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. And I have this thing just marked up everywhere, just taking notes on all these points, drawing doodles. I'll read you this one. So the beginning of this chapter is called Building Wealth, and the subtitle is Making Money is Not a Thing You Do, It's a Skill You Learn. And when I read that, bells and whistles just went off everywhere in my body, and it was this moment of awe. I was, holy fuck, like that hits hard. And I didn't know why, but it was something that kind of stopped me in my tracks. So I even just drew like a little face right here of like someone in awe, and then I put an annotation next to that face in quotation, beat drops in Mountains by Hans Zimmer. If you haven't seen Interstellar, phenomenal movie. The soundtrack is fucking incredible. But that's what it made me think of, is that bass drop, that the beat drop in Mountains by Hans Zimmer. Listen to that song if you haven't heard it. And so then what I did is I put a tip under there, put on headphones and listen to Mountains by Hans Zimmer from Interstellar soundtrack and read this line over and over the whole song. So try it. It's pretty dope. I put on the headphones and I just read in my mind, making money is not a thing you do, it's a skill you learn. And there's a soundtrack in the background just charging those words up with even more energy. And then I even put a part two saying, if you liked how you felt when you did tip one, listen to Since I Was Broke by Russ and do the same thing. So then I repeated and do the same thing. And now I almost have like this book that is an experience that you can go through. It's not just words on a page. So if I would ever give this to someone, I almost have combined the book with my mind, and they're getting a next iteration of a book. But really, I like it for myself when I'm rereading, to have these ideas, have these circles, these stars, these highlights. And that's how I like to read every book. That's how I get the most out of it. Now, the first book I want to talk about is The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. This is my favorite book of all time. I've probably read this book 7 or 8 times, cover to cover. The first time I read it, I just breezed through it. And I heard someone say once that reading a good book is like riding a bicycle down a hill. And I used to never like reading, but I kept reading because I thought it was something I was supposed to be doing. And there were some good books here and there, but then every once in a while you find that book where it just reads itself. It does feel like you're riding a bicycle down the hill. And that's what this book felt like to me. It was effortless. The pages just turned themselves. I just kept churning through it. And so I would recommend it if you feel called to do it, pick it up. It's very impactful. I do want to read a couple passages from it just to kind of give you a preview of this sacred text. It does feel sacred to me, at least. So this is from the beginning of the book, and the title is Understand How Wealth is Created. First off, let me give a little background on Naval. So Naval is an angel investor. He's a founder of AngelList, and I think ePinions, maybe those are the two things. But he's invested in a lot of tech companies in Silicon Valley, like Uber, Twitter. I don't know his whole portfolio, but he's a very wealthy and seemingly happy guy at the same time, which is why I was drawn to him. And Naval is smart as fuck. What I love about Naval is his lessons are so concise. If you follow him on Twitter, he'll have like a one sentence tweet that it packs a punch, meaning there's a lot packed into just very few words. And I think that's what makes his work so enjoyable for me, is it's very simple but very impactful. And so what someone did is they took all of Naval's interviews, tweets, podcasts, articles, and they combined them into this book. So Eric Jorgensen actually was the guy who did it. So Naval didn't necessarily write the book, but this is just all of his speeches, his interviews, his articles, his tweets, organized and compacted into a readable book. And so the first passage I'm going to read from Naval is the title is Understand How Wealth is Created. Now, this is Naval speaking here. I like to think that if I lost all my money and you dropped me on a random street in any English-speaking country, within 5 or 10 years, I'd be wealthy again, because it's just a skill set I've developed that anyone can develop. It's not really about hard work. You can work in a restaurant 80 hours a week and you're not going to get rich. Getting rich is about knowing what to do, who to do it with, and when to do it. It's much more about understanding than purely hard work. Yes, hard work matters and you can't skimp on it, but it has to be directed in the right way. If you don't know yet what you should work on, the most important thing is to figure it out. You should not grind at a lot of hard work until you figure out what you should be working on. Now, that concept really blew me away. And as I started to think about it, it made a lot of sense. On air quotes, no longer involved. But I thought about the hardest workers that I've seen. The hometown that I come from has a very big Mexican population, and the Mexican community in my hometown, they work hard. They work harder than anyone else I know. I mean, they're putting in long days. Some of them have physical labor jobs like construction, and they just grind day in and day out for years. Now, are they rich? Maybe some of them are. I don't know. But I know that just working hard in construction isn't going to get you rich just because you're working hard. So I started to think about maybe it's not about hard work because I don't think anyone really works harder than people who work in construction, physical labor jobs, just grinding all day, every day. I mean, that's taxing both on the mind and the body. That's hard work. But then there's people who they just work from a computer. They're not moving their body all day. They probably don't work as many hours and they're making a lot of money. And they're not necessarily working harder, but they're just working on something that has a greater output. So when you have a input directly related to your outputs, meaning I get paid, say you're getting paid $12 an hour, just to give an example. You have to put in 1 hour to get $12 back, 12 units back. Now that doesn't scale very well because you just have to put in more hours and you're going to get the same amount of units back. So people who are construction, they get that set amount of pay back, but then they just have to put in a ton of hours to get it back. What if you could increase in 10x, 100x, 1000x your output for the same amount of input, meaning you put in hours of work and you get 5,000, 10,000, even more, whatever it is, dollars back. It's still the same hour of work. It's probably not harder than shoveling cement and doing a physical labor for an hour, but you're getting more back because of the type of work that you're working on. So that's going to bring me into the second passage of the book I wanted to read when Naval's talking about specific knowledge. He says, find and build specific knowledge. Specific knowledge cannot be taught, but it can be learned. When I talk about specific knowledge, I mean figure out what you were doing as a kid or teenager almost effortlessly. Something you didn't even consider a skill, but people around you noticed. Your mother or your best friend growing up would know. Examples of specific knowledge could be sales skills, musical talents with the ability to pick up any instrument, an obsessive personality. You dive into things and remember them quickly. Love for science fiction. You're into reading sci-fi, which means you absorb a lot of knowledge very quickly. Playing a lot of games. You understand game theory pretty well. Gossiping, digging into your friend's network. That might make you into a very interesting journalist. The specific knowledge is sort of this weird combination of unique traits from your DNA, your unique upbringing, and your response to it. It's almost baked into your personality and your identity. Then you can hone it. No one can compete with you on being you. Most of life is a search for who and what needs you the most. End quote. So something that I've found is specific knowledge is not just things from childhood. You can develop specific knowledge later in life. For example, I work in sales. Now, I wouldn't consider myself a natural at sales. I wasn't growing up in high school a super charismatic communicator. I didn't have to fight with my parents for what I want in very eloquent responses. I didn't have to hone that skill of persuasion, influence, and sales. But it is something that I've been developing. So when I was 19, I was 18 actually when I dropped out of college. Did a year of college, dropped out, did some businesses, but when I was 19, I got a job in sales, door-to-door sales, and I sucked at it. And it wasn't something that I could just read in a book and do. I had to learn by doing. Nobody could teach me how to do it. I did learn a lot from the people who I worked with, but it was ultimately something only I could learn by doing it. And that is something, because it is specific knowledge, it actually gives me more leverage. Now, I don't know if every form of specific knowledge gives more leverage, but what I mean by leverage is I have a bigger lever and I can pull on it to get more output for my input. So 1 hour of work in sales, depending on what you're selling, can give you a lot more output, a lot more money than, say, working a physical labor job. So sales is a very good example of specific knowledge that I think is very important and has helped me a lot because it is in direct correlation with your self-development, or at least within my self-development. The more I develop myself, the better communicator I become, the more organized I become, the more disciplined I become, the higher self-worth I have, which is super important. I'm going to talk about that next, is in direct correlation to my performance in sales and how much money I make. So I love sales because it's a challenge, because it forces me to become better. Every day is different. I can't just mindlessly sell. I'm going to suck if I do. I have to be on it. I have to be present. I have to be aware. I have to be locked and loaded, ready to go every single day when I sell. Another example of specific knowledge for me is that obsessive personality. I think I haven't went to a doctor, but I definitely have ADD tendencies where my focus can be in many places at once, but I can dive into things super quickly and just immerse myself in it, which growing up in school, they teach us that is a problem that you need to, take Adderall or Ritalin or some medication to hone your focus. But I actually think it's a very big superpower if you can learn how to use that ADD in a way that propels you. So an example of that would be, because you have ADD and your attention is in all these different areas, you're going to be able to pull information from completely different fields and synthesize a new idea and be able to see a more holistic and bigger picture than someone who maybe can just focus on one thing at a for a long period of time. Now, that person who can focus on one thing for a long period of time, that doesn't mean they're better or worse than you. They're going to have a better specific knowledge for that skill. But I'll speak to the ADD attention in different places because that's just kind of what I've experienced. So it allows me to learn a lot. That's why I read multiple books. I can, take a few pages here and there from all these different books, and then I can kind of pull them together, see how they relate to each other. And there's a whole new lesson that emerges from all of those coming together, as opposed to just one of those books individually. Now, specific knowledge is not something that I feel like I have a complete grasp on in terms of knowing what all my specific knowledge is, but it's something I've been chewing on and digesting ever since I read this book a couple of years ago, continuing to find and hone and understand what my specific knowledge is. I think communication, again, is the most important skill that I have found that I can develop because of the clarity it gives me for my thinking, the amount of money I can make, the amount of influence I have, the amount of quality relationships I can have as a direct result of communication. Now, the third passage I want to read from Naval's book is, if you're it's only after you're bored when you have great ideas. It's never going to be when you're stressed or busy, running around or rushed. Make the time. I think this passage right here by Naval is super topical to our society and culture today because it is so easy to escape boredom. We have phones. Okay, phones are literally designed to keep your attention as much as possible, unless you change the settings, which I can talk about how to make your phones less addictive. But your phones are inherently designed to be addictive. So whenever we're bored, we can just take out the phone, start scrolling, and boom, we're not bored anymore. But what happens is it creates fog in your brain. You lose that clarity of your own thoughts, and it's harder to decipher what you're thinking versus what other people's thoughts are inside your own mind. So I think it's extremely important to try to make time to be bored. Yes, that might mean literally just sitting and staring at the wall and doing nothing. And it's going to be painful because it's so much easier to just be bored and to fill that void. But really, what I found is it's an escape to feel that feeling of pain. When I'm going on my phone a lot, when I'm scrolling on social media a lot, I do feel a sense of pain, a sense of boredom, and I'm using that to escape that feeling. If it's hard for you to experience boredom, to experience that pain of doing nothing, then I would encourage you to dive into that and sit with that and have that strength to feel that fully, because that's when the channel gets opened. And when I say channel, I mean the channel to what I imagine as my higher self, something outside of time that can just pump my mind full of ideas that are for the good of all, that are for a more harmonious life for me, others, the people around me, and the whole world. And if I don't take the time to be bored, then that channel gets blocked off. And this is something I'm actively working on. I am not the perfect person by any means. Nobody is, but I really struggle with this. It's so having that ADD, it's so easy for me to get distracted easily and just go on my phone and scroll away. But I'm working on being more cognizant of when I'm doing that and allowing myself to be bored, to allow these intuitions, these good ideas come. For example, this podcast, I haven't really recorded a podcast in a long time. I've been busy. I've been in a big career change. I work in tech sales now. And that was a whole process over the past few months. But now that things are a little bit more settled than that, I've had time to kind of let the dust settle. And I've been allowing myself to be bored lately. And I realized that I was really feeling called and pulled to make some more content and just about what things I've been learning and what I've been going through, because I want to understand it myself better, but I also hope it can help someone in some way. So being bored, try to do more of it, stare out the window. If you're taking a shit, don't go on your phone. I know it's hard. That's like the best time to go on your phone when you got your little break on work. But if you can, hold off that urge. If you're waiting in line somewhere, try not to go on your phone. Just these little things can add up, and you'll notice some mental clarity compound over time. Now, the third thing I want to talk about is, well, it's not the third thing. I've talked about a lot, but the next topic is the law of attraction. I want to talk about how it's worked for me and just my thoughts on it. Law of attraction, manifestation, what it is, how it works. And I'm going to pull up the second book that I think has been the most impactful for me, and that's Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. In this book, I'll just read the cover it for you so you can better understand what it's about. Tap into the power of your subconscious mind to improve your self-image, learn to use your positive past, set and achieve worthwhile goals, develop compassion, self-respect, and forgiveness, cultivate the power of rational thinking, discover the key to a happier, more successful life. Now, self-improvement books, self-help books, they can be great. I've found myself to kind of been steered away from them because it's almost mental masturbation where I'm just reading the same ideas over and over, thinking I'm changing and bettering my life, but I'm just making myself feel good because I'm reading something warm and fuzzy in a book. If I had to recommend one self-help book for anyone, it would be Psycho-Cybernetics. And this book, to me, is about reprogramming your subconscious, changing your beliefs about yourself, which to me is what the law of attraction is. So the first passage I want to read from this powerful book is here. The self-image is a premise, a base, or a foundation upon which your entire personality, your behavior, and even your circumstances are built. Meaning, my interpretation of that is what you believe about yourself determines how you are in the world and determines the life that you experience. If you are someone who has this belief of, on a subconscious level, of, oh, I'm a person who doesn't have a lot of money. Maybe you grew up in a household that didn't have a lot of money, where your parents would say things like, money is the root of all evil, or rich people are evil, rich people are greedy, they just take for themselves. Money doesn't buy happiness. You don't need a lot of money. Those types of things. In your subconscious, you're going to have programs to think that you don't need a lot of money or that money is bad, and you're actually going to repel those things because you have this belief about yourself that you're the type of person that just doesn't have a lot of money. So the book goes on to further that point and to give examples to prove how your subconscious mind, your beliefs about yourself and your self-worth directly determines the life that you experience. But then, most importantly, how to actually change, mold, reshape, and rewire those beliefs so you can create a life that you actually want to live. Now, I'll talk about how that's worked for me. I do want to read a couple more passages here. The secret is this: to really live, that is, to find life reasonably satisfying, you must have an adequate and realistic self-image you can live with. So, if your life is not where you want it to be, and you're chronically depressed, chronically stressed, chronically anxious, I'm not going to give medical advice on how to fix that. Maybe you need therapy. Maybe you need to open up to people around you more. Maybe you need to use healthier habits. But ultimately, I think it's unpacking why we are taking the actions that we are. Maybe we have this belief about ourselves that we don't deserve to be happy. We don't deserve to be at peace. We don't deserve to be healthy. And therefore, with that belief, we're going to carry out those actions that affirm that. And so, if you want to create a more fulfilling life, I think that it comes down to our self-image. At least that's what I've found for me. I'll give an example. Something that I have had to do a lot of work around is money. And I didn't grow up in a financially struggling household. My parents are fucking awesome. I love them to death. Great parents, great childhood. And I don't know if I got it from them, but I had a belief about myself that I just couldn't manage money. And I think it comes down to, I remember being as a kid and being in high school that I would get rid of money as fast as I could get my hands on it. If I got money for Christmas, boom, the next day I was immediately going to the Mall of America and buying 2 pairs of basketball shoes and whatever else I could buy to use up all my money. If I got money from a job, I would just buy food all day, every day from the local gas station or just find random shit to buy that I didn't really need. And that pattern continued all the way up until I was like 22. So a year ago, I'm 23 now. And I didn't realize, but there was this subconscious belief that I had around the fear of money or the fear of not having money. And because I had the fear that I would lose all my money, I would act in a way that would keep me in a state of fear of losing all my money because I'd actually put myself in situations where I would lose all my money. So I had to reprogram that. And I had to change my self-image and my relationship to money. And the way that I did that is a few different modalities. One is affirming myself every single day, even when I don't believe it. Saying affirmations that work for you. I would say things like, I love money. Money is awesome. I have a shitload of money. I probably didn't use shitload, but along those lines, I live in abundance. With every breath, I breathe in more money. I get richer and richer every day. I have a millionaire mind. I am very wealthy. Just it doesn't matter exactly what it is. It's whatever feels good for you. And this could be distributed across other examples. So affirming myself as in saying it out loud, writing it on my mirror. So I would imprint it on my subconscious every time I brushed my teeth or went to the bathroom and would read that in the mirror, or writing it down in a journal. And I think the key is here is writing it as it is in the present tense, not saying, oh, I want to have a lot of money or I want to be healthy or I want to be happy, saying I am this now. And at first, for me, I didn't believe it. It felt weird. I'm like, this is lies. This is bogus. Why are you saying this? This clearly isn't true. Go look at your bank account. But I continued at it, and eventually I started to become better at managing money. And I'm not a millionaire. I don't have a shitload of money currently. Well, I guess we all have different definitions of shitload, but I'm not exactly where I want to be financially, but I'm doing my best every day to live on that frequency that I'm already there. And maybe even me just speaking that out loud is an example of me not embodying that in the now and like truly having that conviction to reprogram that subconscious. But yeah, I think affirmations are a big thing. And then yeah, that ends up leading to changing your behaviors, because the more that you affirm yourself these things and tell yourself these things, the more you believe them, and then your behaviors naturally follow suit and change as well. Writing things down, writing that affirmation down, reading it, saying it out loud, and then visualizing it. Like when you're saying that affirmation, something I learned from Paul Chek is actually breathing it in. So if you're saying, I am wealthy, saying I am wealthy, and then breathing that in, feeling it in your cells, feeling it in your body, because what you're going for is a sensation of what you're saying in your body. And I know this might be a little woo for some people. I'm just saying what's worked for me. And then visualizing as well as you're saying it, I am wealthy, and breathing it in. Can you see yourself being wealthy? Can you smell yourself being wealthy? Can you feel yourself being wealthy? What do you hear? Engaging all these senses with your mind and doing that on a everyday continual basis is going to shift and it's going to change. That is your life, I'm saying. At least my life has changed. I'm just I'm not trying to say all this is going to work for you. It's going to be different for everyone. Take everything anyone ever says to you with a grain of salt. Experiment for yourself. If it works, great. If not, that's okay. It's all a matter of finding what works for yourself. There's a lot of content creators who I love, who I don't take everything they say because it's not helpful for me. So I just want to continue to share things that have worked for me and try them out yourself. Don't just take my word for it. So this is the third passage I wanted to read from this book, Psycho-Cybernetics. Quote, you act and feel not according to what things are really like, but according to the image your mind holds of what they're like. You have certain mental images of yourself, your world, and the people around you, and you behave as though these images were the truth, the reality, rather than the things they represent. Again, your beliefs, your self-image determines how you act. How you act determines the life that you live. The life that you live determines how you feel. It all comes back down to actions. What are the daily actions that you do consciously, subconsciously, unconsciously that may or may not be serving you? Examine those. I don't really have a ton else to say. If you liked this video, let me know. I just love to hear it. A lot of people have been reaching out whenever I post content, and I keep that up. I love it. Like the YouTube video, whatever. I'm not really doing it for likes, but yeah, I guess that'd be cool, you know. But anyways, I love you guys. I appreciate you listening to me ramble and rant as I sort out my own thoughts and beliefs, and I hope you can take something from it. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. Your attention is the most valuable thing that you have in the world. Where you put your attention determines everything. So if you decided to put your attention on this video, I am super, super grateful, and I do not take it for granted. I understand it's a powerful thing, and I want to do nothing but charge you up and help you use that attention wisely. With that being said, this is Keegan Maloney, and I am out.